Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm Kathy, and this season is dedicated to exploring the unique world of raising boys. Parenting boys today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code, a mystery, especially when it comes to understanding their inner emotional world. Together, we'll dive into real life stories, share practical tips, and uncover insights to help you and your son thrive, not just survive. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unlock the parenting code, one boy at a time. Welcome back to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm your host, Kathy, and today I'm excited to welcome Aliesha Embleton. Aliesha is a stepmom to two boys and someone who brings both heart and insight to the parenting journey. With a background in behavioral science, psychology, and coaching, Aliesha supports families and children in nurturing emotionally resilient, authentic, and confident children. She's also the founder of Sapling Minds and the author of the best-selling book From Seed to Sapling. But today we're hearing from her not only as an expert, but as a mom walking the journey with her boys, just like so many of us. Aliesha, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kathy. It's great to be here.
So let's start. Can you paint a bit of a picture of what everyday life looks like for you right now in your home with an it's 8 and 10 years old, right?
So they were around that age when I met them, they're now full into the teenage years.
Okay. So how old are they?
They are 14 and 16.
Okay. So that's a different image. Okay. So what does an everyday day look like in your home?
So I guess it depends as to which week it is. So obviously being in that step parenting role, it is a little bit unique. In that we do have the kids 50% of the time, and the other 50% of the time they're with their mum. And so it really sort of depends as to which week it is as to what that sort of looks like in the journey because they're just so polarizingly different.
So tell me about
But
a week in your home when you are doing the parenting.
so I guess a week in our home when we've got the kids, there's a lot more life and activity within the home in that week. There's you hear the kids singing along and doing just kind of living their life around you. And so it's busy juggling work and school and all of the extracurricular activities and things, just like every household. But yeah, I guess there's also that fun of it. It is such precious time because you don't have it all the time. And so
Hmm.
it's always so much more. Yeah, I guess it's just that sort of really special and it I guess that time where we do have the family together, it's just really savored because we don't get that all the time.
Yeah, it kind of goes like with quality and quantity, that it's not connected with the quantity of time, but the quality that you put into the time you do have.
Yes, exactly. So, but just like sort of normal households, juggling a million things.
So what would be different on a week that you don't have them, besides it being calmer? How would you put more of a focus on your business work or what's the biggest difference in your world?
I think the biggest difference that happens between the two different weeks is exactly that in one week, because we've got the kids, it's really focused on maximizing family time. So it's finishing work early to be able to do school pickup and to be able to spend that little bit of time in the afternoon together. And it's making sure that we've got that time together, having dinner and it's making sure that there is the family time put first and foremost. And work sort of takes a back seat during that time frame. But then on the flip side, in the alternate week, that's when there is more capacity to be able to then put in some extra time and focus around work. And so for my business, that's where I can really put in a lot more effort and time and energy into it. And so that's what I do. In that week, I'll look to plan so much more ahead and try and schedule a whole heap more work that I can so that I can then balance that extra time.
Yeah. What surprised you the most about being like stepping into the role of a stepmom? Like, especially because when you first started your relationship with them, they were in that period of time that your work delves into the middle childhood years. So, what surprised you about that?
I think what surprised me is probably two elements to it. The first one is the special role that you get to play when you're the bonus parent. That's kind of how that's what I call it. Like we're the bonus parent. We just get to be that extra love and support and just be that extra person in their life. And I think it surprised me as to how how special that role actually is in being able to be that bonus parent. And I think the other element that surprised me was when you do step in as a step parent sort of role on that journey, you're stepping into a family's journey midway along. It's not starting the journey together with the pregnancy and then the child and raising them together. You step in like partway through. And if we think of any sort of analogy where we're trying to sort of join something mid flow, you really got to kind of run to start the journey. And so I think it surprised me as well as to I guess what that dynamic sort of really looks like for a step parent because it is so unique. And it yeah, I guess I've sort of come from a childhood where I had the divorced parents and the step parent scenario. So I've sort of lived this from both sides of the equation. And it's been absolutely wonderful to be able to see it from both sides of the equation. And being able to develop that whole other level of respect and appreciation for the journey that my parents went through.
Hmm. What's something that your boys recently, fairly recently, would have taught you about emotions or about parenting, but something that you learned from them?
I think something recently is the so something that I've always been very conscious of is as parents, we don't have all of the answers, and we're not here to provide all of the answers for the kids. We're here to be their coach, to be their guide, to, I guess, be that lighthouse on their journey. And the nuancing of that in actual daily living is really incredible to see. And there was just another nuancing of that recently because I have gone through now two different child developmental stages with these kids. I joined their life when they were in middle childhood and they're now in their teenage years. And they're very different requirements in what they need from me in that sort of capacity. And so I think it is very much something I think of a particular something just recently where it's being able to let them uncover their journey, uncover their what's right and what's wrong sort of situations, and to be able to work out those answers themselves. And in doing so, be able to sort of obviously navigate, how risky and what the consequences might be. But just one of those sorts of situations where they'll work it out. And they did. And they then sort of realized, oh, actually, yeah, maybe what you said was right. um, but I think it's just seeing those nuances between the different stages has been something that I've reflected on just in the last week. And just having gone through yet another one of those sorts of moments. And just, yeah, just actually sitting there and going, it was so different going through that a week ago to what it was, previously. So it's just that journey of being the lighthouse for them and the guide rather than the person who has the answers, and letting them make those mistakes and letting them work things out for themselves and realize that you're there to help and provide information should they wish, but you're not going to just come in and say this is what it all is.
I really do think that parenting truly is like a dance, and I'm way down the road from where you are right now. But I don't think the dance ever stops. And the minute that they're in one developmental stage and you feel like you're in tune and you're in the same, you're dancing to the same tune, the music changes and they move into a new one. And you have to figure out, okay, what does this look like for us, like to get this right? But it never ends. The relationship just keeps growing, but each stage. Like, and I'm sure that's for an entire lifetime. Like, because it's quite interesting how things evolve and how you go to it. I do remember something you said kind of resonated with me because I remember, um, especially in later adolescence, but when our child was still, under our roof, I remember it being quite a adolescence was challenging, puberty was challenging, and of course, because they're, moving into, understanding their identity, everything that you've put into their foundation. Now they're practicing and they're testing and they're revising. But I remember asking our son when he was a little bit older in his university years and reflecting a little bit and asking him, was there something that during that challenging time, especially, that you needed, from me that I could have done something better? Because I really am interested to know, like, what's the impact of this? Like, was I dancing to the same music kind of thing? And he said something that really struck me. And it was like, Mom, at those times, in those times, I just needed you to trust. Just trust that I could make the decision, even if I failed, even if I fell down. I knew you were there, but I needed you to trust. And that was a really good reflection because as parents, we want to protect, we try to step back, but when we think, especially when we think that they're making choices that are going to negatively impact, yeah, it's easy to step over that line. So that was you had said kind of the same thing and letting them make those mistakes, especially I believe when they are under your roof, so that when they are out on their own, they'll still make mistakes, but you will have been there to help them kind of figure out, oh, where did that go wrong? And, what might look differently the next time. And you can help provide that foundation so that when they are on their own, they've got a better chance of being successful for whatever that means to them.
Mm. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about meltdowns because often when we're talking about boys, especially, there's either, the meltdowns from the boys or, as a mom, there's meltdowns as moms. But there are times either with their meltdown or our meltdown that we get that feeling of, I got that wrong. I didn't respond to that. I kind of, I wish I hadn't have done that. Have you had any kinds of moments that was your first reaction when you were kind of looking back at what had happened?
I think if any parent answered that with no, then then
Yeah.
they shouldn't be in that role. Yeah, I guess every single person who is a parent will always have something that they sit there and look back and go, yeah, I could have handled that better.
What
And
sticks in your
I,
mind?
I think for me, it has been the journey of moving into the teenage years and the differences in what that relationship brings. Because it has actually changed the relationship between us. It's different to what it used to be. And I think sitting there and being able to like that there's particular sort of moment that sort of sticks out in my mind. And it was in the teenage years, there is a lot more of the attitude that starts to emerge. Um, and like you're saying before, this is them working out who they are in the world, and it's part of that journey. But it's in those moments that you're sitting there and they've said something that's not necessarily wrong or anything like that, but it still could have been said in a different way. And then it's how do we respond when it might be sort of triggering or emotional or more extreme for us in how we're experiencing that moment? How do we maintain our calm? And I know that that's one of the things that I will sit there and I will look back and go, how could I have done that even better? Um, and it's not like this situation that came to mind. It's not that there was a really sort of strong response or anything like that, but I sit there going, how could I have been more just simply sitting with them rather than letting it, I guess, play in with me and my sort of thoughts there. How could I just simply put that to the side and just simply be in that present moment with them more? And I think that's one of the things that I mean, I know it's something I would love to be even more present in those moments with them. And it's something that I will continue to develop and work on for myself for the rest of my life because I see that it's something that we can always get better at. Um, but yeah, I think that was probably the most recent one that sort of pops to mind as something there.
Well, you're in a different stage now, but from what I understand of your work and your book, you do have a real focus on what you call middle childhood and before the adolescent years come in. So looking at that period of time, which I also find really interesting because especially in light of boys, that time where they start public school for those first number of years, those are very challenging years for a lot of little boys for a lot of reasons. And so I was kind of wondering, did you notice, like, in when you were with your boys during that time, so when they were, from like 6 and 8, during that period of time, did you notice any emotional changes?
Yeah, so look, I guess for the listeners, just to clarify, middle childhood is typically from around ages 6 to 12. is that middle childhood phase of development. And I joined the kids' life when they were sort of, roughly halfway through that journey. Um, and what I noticed both being in that journey as well as what I've noticed working with other kids. Like I've recently been working with a beautiful little 8-year-old boy, just one-on-one in coaching. And what I know from having worked with all of these kids is that every single year during middle childhood is so vastly different to the previous year. They, as a little human being, change so much during those times of development. And it's incredible being able to sit back and watch that journey. Um, you know, just being able to see the difference in concepts that they can grasp from one year to the next. If I think of some of the work that I do, and what I've seen with all of these different kids is that authenticity, as an example, just simply understanding the concept of what that actually means for them. And so my definition of authenticity is around that real deep self-trust and being able to navigate life from that place of self-trust. And so for these kids, like these are very sort of adult concepts that we're talking about. And so for every year that it is that they are developing, they understand it in a completely different manner. With the little sort of 8-year-old, um, we would be talking about masks and being able to actually use like little pretend masks to be able to understand the concept of how we might hide part of ourselves during different times of interactions. And what I noticed, it's pretty much the exact same thing that these kids go through. What I've sort of witnessed in my journey in that sort of step parenting role is very much the same, that these kids are going through such different grasping of those sorts of concepts year upon year, and they are evolving at such rapid rates during that time frame. The Their ability to be able to learn a concept is actually quite evolutionary during that sort of stage of development because it's like building blocks. We can only put a certain number of building blocks on each year because that's sort of the level of what they can grasp and comprehend for that sort of stage of where they're at for that one year. But then the next year, they've grown a whole heap more. And then we can actually add a whole extra layer. And so by the time we've reached the full journey of middle childhood from, starting with them, I typically start with kids at around 7. Um, and, by the time you then have reached 12 years of age with these kids, these parents have been able to just build on those concepts year upon year upon year in the age appropriate manners in which it comes through. And so they actually create these lived experiences of understanding, what does resilience actually mean? What does authenticity actually mean? How do I show up in the world? How how do I actually care for myself in situations where it is more stressful? How do I start to learn with each year of primary school, that with that little bit more homework, with that little bit of extracurricular activities, with that little bit more social engagement that starts to happen? There's just that little bit more that adds on year upon year upon year. And being able to work through these developmental concepts in a very similar sort of way to what we're seeing. We don't expect the child who's in year two, grade two at school, to be able to do the same homework that the child in year six could do. And so we need to sort of bring that same thought process into how we're developing those other life skills like resilience and critical thinking and various things. So these are all they just change so much year upon year during that middle childhood stage. You know, if we all reflect back to the 7-year-old early in their primary school journey, or early in that sort of, junior school journey, through to the child who finished that sort of early school journey in around year six and then sort of transitioned off into their next sort of high school sort of world, they're such different children and they have changed and grown so much. It's incredible.
I wonder if uh, so it was in a book that was written by Stephen Bidup, and he talked about the period of time in a boy's life around 8 years old, and he referred to some thinking that there was a hormonal shift during that particular time, and it often left little boys more vulnerable to things like depression and that kind of emotional upheaval. I've tried really hard to find other research that kind of backs that up. And it's really, some people say, yes, that's true. Some people say, no, it's not. My own personal experience was it very definitely was that period of time around 8 years old. For us, it was grade two, the third year after being in a public school. There was definitely a shift. And I'm not sure if it was because of a hormonal imbalance or, that growth at that particular developmental stage, or if it was the, culmination of being at a point of understanding that really the school system for a little boy was very different. And by that point, lots of little boys, their self-esteem, their identity as little boys is changing. And because they are not finding these huge successes in the educational institution, they can really take a nosedive you know, in their self-esteem, their sense of worth. And so I wonder, like with your own boys or working with boys, have you come across any of that that is particular to that particular time frame around 8 years old?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. The longer answer there is what the research does actually show is that self-esteem does take a nosedive when children are 8 or 9 years old. And I've
Sorry,
seen this.
all children? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to focus on the boys because my understanding is that it is different. So it's that period of time is specifically about self-esteem for boys. The research you're talking about, is it all children or is it gender related?
So it does affect all children at that stage of development. It doesn't discriminate between girls and boys. What I have seen is that there is a slight variation in the age as to where it starts to take a little bit more of a hit, but it doesn't discriminate between them. So girls tend to be just slightly earlier. So where the research is sort of talking 8 or 9, girls will probably be more at around the 7 ballpark, whereas the boys will be sort of more in that 8 or 9. Um, but it doesn't discriminate between them. It unfortunately it affects all children as they go through that sort of age period. I'm not sure as to whether there is a hormonal change or some sort of biological change that happens for them. I am really intrigued to find out if there is some research papers that I can find on that. That's my sort of areas of interest. I will sit there and read research papers. Um, but my, I guess what I have seen, and so this is just simply my perception of what adds to this issue at that point in time is that these kids, if we think of that stage of journey, they have just been going through early childhood where there is so much support and development around their language skills, their physical skills, the parent-child bonding. There is so much that happens along that journey through through that before they start school. They then start into that preschool, kindergarten sort of time frame. And again, there is still so much support and structure around them because it is this new journey. This is new school. This is new world for them. And so there's still so much of that scaffolding that's there. The very first year of school, again, it's the new journey for them. And so again, there is so much scaffolding and support that they receive during that time frame. But grade two, it's now same sames. People start to step back. There's starting to become this expectation that these kids have understood what's expected of them in that environment. They understand this routine now. They understand what the school journey is looking like, and they need people less. So, where there was so much built up around them leading up to this, at about that grade two step, there's now less need. These kids are starting to become more like they're starting to want to assert their own independence in the world. They're starting to want to try and experiment to do some things themselves. And so people start to change what that dynamic looks like for them. And so my own theory is that a contributor to this is that they have then reached what I call the forgotten years, where they are now doing the same sorts of journey that they have been doing. And so there is a higher level of expectation that these kids can do that more independently and that there is less attention and focus on those years than what there had been previously to what there then is when they transition into the teenage years.
And I wanted to ask you about, when little boys around that period of time. And so I noticed something in a school that I was working in, and I had watched this little boy. I had known him for 3 years, kindergarten, grade one, and then grade two. And he was the sweetest, kindest, most compassionate. Like every teacher wanted to have that little boy. And when he started grade two, like within the first few months of grade two, I really noticed a shift. And he was just a little bit more, I wouldn't say assertive. He was becoming a little more aggressive. He was doing the more, more, there were more examples of rough play that just bordered on, something else. So obviously he was testing out his toughness. And I asked him at because I'd known him, and I asked him, and I said, you seem to have changed a little bit. And, I keep having to talk to you, about something, like standing in a line with the others and just, causing some conflict. And he looked at me with these sweet little eyes and he said, "Well, Miss Kathy, I'm becoming a boy. Like I am a boy. So I have to be aggressive." He said the word. I have to be aggressive. I'm a boy. And that just kind of where, like I know where it comes from, but it was like the messages that our little boys receive start at such a young age. And then, like you said, at a period of time when they are starting to have more independence, they will be testing out these roles. So when you were raising your stepsons when they were in, that middle childhood time. Were there any times that you saw them trying on those masks, like trying on oh, I'm the tough guy, when you knew inside that that wasn't their authentic self, but that was what they felt they should be showing to others? Did you have any experiences like that?
Oh, look, definitely. And I think my experiences in both my role in the step parent as well as my role in my business, um, I've seen it in both. It's it's definitely something that I have seen in the step parenting journey, that it's a it is definitely something that these kids have gone through, having to be the tough guy where emotions are suppressed, um, because that is what they are starting to perceive as the expectations externally from the world around them. And what can really be um, really sort of challenging during that time is that if we don't address those sorts of journeys with them and actually don't help these little boys to understand that emotions aren't anything to be scared of. They're not anything to turn away. They're not anything to shut down. They are part of authenticity. They are a insight and a tool and something that helps navigate that self-trust and be able to understand that this is part of their journey in the world. And if we can help them to work through that, then they can actually become a whole other level of strong man from it.
So
Um,
a lot of people, Alicia, would resonate with what you're saying as the adult.
mm.
But in practical terms, how did you do it with your son?
So, in practical terms, it was getting them to actually acknowledge what the emotion was in that, not necessarily right in that moment. And there is a nuancing between naming the emotion and giving it the space to what there is in making an emotion king. Because we don't want to go to the extreme end of the pendulum there, where emotions become the king of everything, um, where they're being ruled by the emotions. That's not what we want to achieve. And so what it was in those moments, it was actually finding the times outside of the exact situation that was in play. So finding those little moments in between the moments where you can go for a walk. And it was sometimes it was going for a walk, sometimes it was just having a chat and a reflection, um, just quietly at home. Um, Sometimes there were sort of other activities, but it was very much helping to find the moments between the moments and helping them to find those pauses where they could actually reflect back on the situation, identify what the emotions were that were at play for them, and then being able to understand where their learnings from that journey. So that could be, were there ways that they could allow themselves to feel a little bit more? And I would use the analogy of, if we think of some sort of bubbly liquid in a jar, like a little bottle, and we take the cap off just a tiny little bit just to let, one bubble out. But then we'll put the cap back on, and that's okay. But then maybe the next time, because we've then learned from that situation, how could we open the cap and let two little bubbles flow out from that particular, bubbly liquid? And then, so it's just kind of helping them to see you don't have to completely take the cap off that, bottle of soda and let all of the soda explode. We can just simply do a tiny little bit and then close it again, and then a little bit more the next time. And it's okay to develop that strength slowly. But I found using that sort of analogy really helpful.
When you were just talking now about finding those kind of golden moments where your son would be able to have those deeper conversations with you, it triggered a memory of my own, but then it made me want to ask this question because that space is a very vulnerable space, and sometimes when you are able to be in that space with your son, he might say something that just like it's heartbreaking, it's heart-wrenching to hear how he has perceived something or the pain he felt when someone said that to him or did that to him. Or have you ever had, but I don't think that those expressions come out until you're in that very safe space with someone that you really trust. So
Mhm.
have you had similar experiences with your boys?
I think this is where the nuancing of the bonus parent versus the biological parent really comes into play, is that I'm really conscious my role is the bonus parent. I'm here to provide that extra love and support and attention, but and I will always be there for them no matter what. There is just no question about that. But I think there is such a critical role for the biological parents through the journey. And I always, from day one, I have always encouraged that really strong parent-child bond between the biological parents and the children, and really held that firm, I'm a bonus. You get to have an extra one in the mix. And so I I think being able to help bring that real clarity for them around the different people that they had in their life has meant that the relationship that we've been able to develop is different to what that would be for the biological parent. It is a different relationship. We're able to, it's, I guess it's built more on because it's optional. In many ways, it's an optional relationship for them. And so it has its own really unique strength that comes from that it lets you connect in more of a like, friend is the wrong word, but it lets you have this whole other kind of relationship with them, that you're a trusted person in their world that is you you're a trusted person in their world, but in a different way. That you like what I've found between children and biological parents is that there is this expectation, like there's this, requirement for these kids to, have a certain conversations with their parents, and to, there is what that journey is always. being. And then when you're the bonus parent, you get to have all of that incredible connection and family time as an extra one. And so your relationship with them is built on this whole other level of love and gratitude and appreciation because you're a bonus. And so it does change the kinds of conversations you would have. You know, you can then be that trusted, that extra trusted adult where if it was something a little bit embarrassing or something like that where they don't necessarily want to have to talk to the parents about that, you know, they can come to you because you're that bonus person.
It almost sounds similar to the relationships, the differences in the relationships that you might have with your siblings compared to what you might have to your best friend.
Yeah,
Like it's
exactly.
a different kind of an opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want it for a moment. I enjoyed reading your book from sapling, sorry, from seed to sapling, from seed to
Yeah.
sapling. And when I was reading it, I was wondering, it was like, okay, the first question I want to ask her is the book itself. Did the book come from, like sometimes there will be something that happens, some pivotal moment that happens in your life, with you and your children and all that. And that starts that flame to write that story. Something says, oh, I have to share this with the world. But it comes from some kernel that is part of your personal life. So I was wondering, was there a point that started this when you started the journey of being a stepmom?
Yes, is the short answer. I think the book is something that I've had bubbling away since I've seen these kids go through that middle childhood stage and being so fortunate to be in their life and seeing other friends' kids go through that stage subsequently and just seeing all of these children go through these same sorts of challenges. Um, and I couldn't just sit there anymore. I had to write something about this. I had to do something. It was just becoming too common. Like I sit there and I'll speak to various different friends and I would be hearing the same stories and the same experiences from everybody. And I was sitting there going, but why are we not having these conversations then proactively? Why are we having so many reactive conversations? And so I couldn't just sit there any longer. And so I think the book itself came about when I saw all of these kids going through these journeys and I I just felt like I couldn't be silent any longer. Like there was just this moment where I have to take action now, and I can't let this go. And I really vividly remember the moment where it just went, I cannot sit here any longer, and I have to take action. And I was actually off camping for the weekend and was just talking to this one particular lady just around these sorts of experiences again. And it was just I walked away from that conversation going, that's it. That is my line in the sand. Um, it has to be different. We have to take different action. And the fact is there is limited insights on how we can do this proactively. There is so much support out there for how we can do a lot of these things reactively. So when there is an anxiety issue already, when there is, something already there, there is so much incredible support. And I love that we have all of that out there. But why can't we get proactive as well? Every single kid should be getting these learnings, every single one without fail. And I had to write the book. It was just something that I saw too many common threads, and there are so many people working on individual elements of what I have culminated in this book because we can't have one item isolated from any other. If I think of resilience, for example, we cannot have resilience alone. Just simply developing that is not enough. We have to also develop authenticity because otherwise, how will they know when during that time where they're in a challenging situation, how will they know how to navigate out of that situation if they haven't developed that authenticity and that self-trust? We can't just develop any one of these, which is where I came up with the three pillars, and all three of them it's like a three-legged stool. Without one of them, we're going to fall over.
Well, I understand your passion. I think I've got the same drive and the same
Yeah.
motivation, and probably the same challenges in that rather than waiting until there are big problems and then trying to, go backwards to figure out, where you could have done something, trying to start at an earlier point to make a difference. It's sometimes hard to get people to take those steps until they feel some kind of, pain in their own world or in their child's world. So it's challenging, and like I hope people do read your book because there's some really good information in there that can make a difference. So the other thing with your book, it was okay. I love the title, From Seed to Sapling. And I was wondering if you could kind of describe your own parenting journey using that kind of a metaphor. Like, where would you place yourself right now from seed to sapling in your journey? And how do you plan to keep growing to become that sapling?
Yeah. I think, like I mentioned earlier, as a step parent, it's such a unique journey where a tree will start as a seed and then it will grow into the sapling and then it's developing these roots and it's slowly developing and growing into this incredible tree that is just so grounded with the earth. As a step parent, you step in somewhere along that journey that's already transpired for that family. And so there's this whole fast tracking of growth that you go through on the journey. Um, and I think for me, because it's just always been such an area of interest and an area of passion is this child development. And so, I like I said, my excitement outside of working and where I like to just sit and relax is I'll sit and read a research paper on some sort of child development space. And so for me, it's always been something that I just am constantly reading and learning and diving into. And so that helped my fast tracking of the journey because I had a theoretical learning already and such a strong academic starting point to be coming from, coupled with the psych training and everything as well from when I was younger. But I had that academic starting point. So for me, it was how do I put that into practice now? And and so that's one of the things that I've really tried to focus on in the book is the practical application of these elements, because that was something that I had to fast track in my journey as a step parent. And so I think if I look at my analogies of seed and saplings and trees, I think I'm somewhere between a sapling and a tree at the moment. And I don't feel that I will ever stop growing. There will never be a point where there's not more for me to be able to learn, be it the theory of something, be it the application of something, the practical implementation, like how do we actually do this and how can we do it better? Like there will always be something more that I'm looking for, but I think it's just such a unique journey as a step parent that you come in mid-process and then it's finding your feet and your position within that incredible space as that bonus.
If you could whisper one piece of advice into the ear of every step parent who is raising boys, especially during the time of middle childhood, what would you
Yeah.
say?
I think the one piece of advice that I would say is that parenting isn't about having all of the answers, especially in that step parenting role where you are a bonus. It is about showing up with heart, with honesty, and with that willingness to grow and to grow both yourself as well as with that family. Knowing that you're going to mess it up. Every single parent does, be it a step parent, be it a biological parent. There will be mess ups, and it's just simply having that intention of wanting to always bring the heart and the honesty and the love first and foremost. So it's all about the intention, I think is kind of where it comes down to, is that it's not about having all the answers. It's not about getting it right. It's about what's your intention with the child and with that particular situation as the step parent.
Well, before we finish today, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had of?
I think we have touched on so many incredible topics. I think the element of, having to be the tough guy for a lot of these little boys is so huge. And I think the part, like even in the advice that sort of came to mind just then and the conversation that we've had so far, I think the element that we just need to be so conscious of as parents in whatever incredible parenting role that we get to play. But I think there's something that we need to be so conscious of is that fear of failure and the perfectionism challenges that both we face as well as the kids are facing. And how can we help them navigate those situations without feeling that shame or without feeling like it's being wrong, as well as ourselves in many of those situations, so that we can help them to learn how to embrace their emotions. And as parents, how can we learn to embrace all of the moments, the perfect ones and the non-perfect ones, because we are perfectly unpolished, and that is exactly how it should be.
Alicia, where can listeners connect and follow with you?
Look, you can grab me on my website, which is saplingminds.com.au. You can also find me on Instagram, which is Sapling Minds AU. Facebook is Sapling Minds. You can catch me on LinkedIn. There's Sapling Minds, or there's actually me, Aliesha Embleton. Follow me on LinkedIn as well. Connect with me there. So many different sort of places, but I would really love to connect with people. I'm constantly popping more content on my website and out onto my socials. Please sign up for my newsletter as well so that we can stay in touch. I do have content that I share within the newsletter that is exclusive to that newsletter cohort. So feel free to sign up there. You can do so on the website, so saplingminds.com.au.
Okay, I'll make sure that those go in the show notes as well. Before we end, I always finish off with two questions that are just for fun. So the first one is, what would be the title for a movie about your family life? And then what would be a very short summary or synopsis?
I think I think my title is probably that perfectly unpolished. I think that's very much the world that we're in. Um, and I think the brief synopsis is because raising humans was never meant to be polished. Um, and it is about, I guess, just navigating the wild and wonderful ride that is parenting, be it the incredible title of a bonus parent as a step parent, or be it the biological parent. But it's a wild and wonderful ride, and raising humans was never meant to be polished.
The second question is, picture yourself sharing some wisdom with one of your sons as they are entering the world of parenting themselves. What would you say to them?
Hmm. I think what I would be sharing with these kids, and I would say that it's for either of the the two of them, um, is there are many different phases to the journey. And at every different phase, you will be different, the child will be different, the needs are going to be different, and embrace the difference of it because it is unique. And if you've got more than one child, it's going to be a unique journey between them. They're going to need something different because that's part of what makes us all so incredible is our uniqueness and our authenticity. So embrace that the journeys are unique as well and that the needs are going to be different and just love the journey that it is and pay attention to the little moments.
Hmm, good advice. Aliesha, thank you again. I know how precious time is for everybody, and I hope you feel that I honored your time today. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you, and I am sure that people will take away some golden nuggets from our conversation. I will include all of your notes, your links and everything in the show notes, and I thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Kathy. It has been just such an honor being able to come and have a conversation and just be able to talk about all of the incredible journey that it is, both as a bonus parent, but also in raising boys, because there are different they are different needs. And I love that we've been able to highlight some of those in our conversation today. So thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today on Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and tune in next week for more conversations about raising boys. If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Aliesha Embleton says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.